Hello, everyone, and welcome to the episode. Before we get started, I wanted to acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional custodians of our land that we now know as Australia. I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation as the traditional custodians of this place that we now call Sydney. I also want to advise the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that some of the names that have been mentioned in today's episode have passed on, and I pay my respects. Thank you very much and enjoy the episode. All right, guys, there's a lot going on in the world right now, and today I have a very interesting and special, brave and courageous guest by the name of Kelly. Now, Kelly's a young adult living in Australia right now who I had the privilege of going to college with, and I invited her to come onto the episode today to share part of her story she was born in Borneo. Moved to Toowoomba, then she went to Brisbane, then now she's in Sydney as a young adult. And she just really bravely shares a lot of her story of how she was discriminated and a victim of so many different types of racial oppression when she was younger, and how that's had an impact on her today. We talk a little bit about more in depth of Kelly's story. We talk about racism within the police in Australia and what can be changed there. We identify that there seems to be quite a hierarchy of political things going on that need to be tapped into for us to be able to start making changes towards having more equality and less racism in Australia. So Kelly and I kind of dig into that topic and try and find a way where not only you and I can start making change, but everyone else in the community can also start making change. So thank you for tuning in. We discuss so many different topics, so I hope you enjoy the episode today. And please, the biggest thing with all this, guys, is I saw people put the black thing on their Black Tuesday profile and all that, which is so good, and that's such a great way to start making change. If this is something that you are passionate about, well, I encourage you to watch this video to the end, and I encourage you to share this video. And I'm going to do more interviews with more people of Indigenous Australian background or cultural diversity to really keep raising that conversation and keep that ongoing. Let's keep this not just something that happens right now, but because this has gone on for people since the day they were born. So for people who don't feel directly affected by racism, well, it's time to step into that zone and start making some change. So guys, I'm not saying that I'm some sort of perfect person when it comes to actively doing things. I certainly haven't been somebody to oppress people of different color. But at the same time, it's so important now that, well, saying nothing is not good enough. It's time to start doing things and making it a part of our life, not just a one-off thing. So I'm hoping to raise that conversation weekly with different people and get different stories. Kelly is so brave for coming on today. And guys, I really, please share this with your community. Go to the march that's going on tomorrow if you get to watch this before then, start making regular donations and to funds and whatnot for Aboriginal people. Let's do this thing, guys. Let's start pulling together, pull our heads in. So enjoy the episode today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for being here. Let's get straight into the first question, and tell me a little bit about your story and personal experiences with racism in Australia.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, first of all, I'll start with my background. So I was born in Germany. Just moved there because my dad was in the army. That's literally the connection that I have. My mom is from a tribe in Borneo, so she's from a tribe that's called the Eora tribe. It's a tribe of headhunters, and my dad is British. So I'm a mixed race person, and I moved to Australia when I was 7. I came from Papua New Guinea before that, so it was a really big difference coming from an all-black country to an all-white country, basically. And I moved to a really small town called Toowoomba, and that's when I first learned what racism was, basically. So to start, where do I start? There's so much that I've been through with racism in Australia, and I remember when I was 7, that was the first racial discrimination I'd experienced. I went to school and people used to pull their eye at me and stuff because I don't know, obviously I'm bit different looking to them. And as I got older and I started going to school, I started getting, even in primary school, like little things like, you know, if you're a little girl, you want to play Disney with your other friends, and I want to be Cinderella, and everyone's like, no, you have to be Pocahontas. Like that was a bad thing as well. Like, please. I mean, it's unbelievable, really. As I got older and I went to high school, that's when it really got bad. So I'm talking like being spat at, having names like COON, GOOK thrown at me, and I'm talking every day. Like, you know, you go to school and people are just yelling it at you. And Toowoomba is a small town. It's a very small redneck community. It's white majority. You know, there's an Indigenous community there, and then you can see very clearly the discrimination that's going on. Especially for me as a kid just coming there, I had no idea what skin color was until I came to Australia. Like, no idea. It baffled me when people would talk to me about like the way that I looked different and the way that I was segregated, like the school systems. I went to school and I was in primary school and I was segregated by my skin color, where to sit at the back. And if you were a white kid and you got in trouble, you were seated at the back with the colored skinned kids. That's how bad it was. I know. I had my high school try to force me to go to an Australian Indigenous camp because they thought I was Australian Aboriginal, and the teacher said it himself in front of the class, "It's okay, you can tell me." I can tell you what? Like, that's the whole government right there. You haven't even educated the country on the fact that there are other Indigenous people in the world. That's the level of ignorance and the standard that's going on. Oh, it infuriates me. And that's just the system. Like, the people itself is at school. Like, I had people rocking up after school just to racially fight me. Like, I'm talking kids from other school, and there were racial fights going on. This is the 90s, and there were so many racial wars. It was so, I can't even explain the types of fights and bashings and discriminations and words and stuff that I heard from such a young age. And as I got older, you know, you just get angrier and angrier and more vocal, and that's where people then tend to go to the conclusion of, you know, when people get upset and they can't vocalize themselves properly, and it's like, oh, well, you know, look how angry they are. They just get angry, or they're just criminals, or they just do bad. And it's just like, do you wonder why? This is continuous bullshit that you're going through. This is continuous discrimination that is just freely happening, and people in authority and teachers and government and parents are letting it happen, and they don't give a shit.
Yeah, it's so just to you know, jump in there. Before we start talking about authorities and I suppose all the parents and the elders and I guess this whole idea of the system that's a flawed system, right? Before we get into that, I want to get a bit more clarity on your upbringing. So what you're saying is, so you were born in Papua New Guinea, is that right?
I was born in Germany. So my dad's in the military, and we traveled from country to country. So I was born in Germany, I've lived in Asia with my mom's tribe. I've lived in England as well. So I've lived in a mixed background, Asian background. Then I moved to Papua New Guinea. Yeah. Then I moved to Australia. And none of that before that did I know what racial difference was from all this moving from country to country as a kid. It was just normal. Multiculturalism was normal for me. Growing up with a mixed parent, having, you know, a white dad. And I say this because my dad's got really dark skin and we don't actually know his full background. So, but growing up with a dad that's from England and a mum that's from the jungle of headhunters, it's a pretty big difference to deal with. So that's the culture that I've grown up with and are trying to adjust and moving to Australia. And I don't even know if I answered that question right, but
I don't even remember what the question was. No.
Yes.
So no, like I just want to get a bit more of a clear idea of your story, because that's important, I think, because
Yep.
like you said, you're now at a stage where you're a let's say a young adult in Sydney, and you're having people, or at least you feel on a day-to-day basis that people assume you're angry, and then they don't know why you're angry and all this stuff. Well, this is your chance to tell them why, because people don't understand it. Everybody has such a deep history of their own, and yours is quite unique, and we need to hear it, and we need to hear the details to really understand, because we don't understand. And that's what makes people naive, and that's what makes people think, oh, well, that person's angry, geez, what. Well, it's time to understand. And I think with what's going on in America, which has sparked something that's been going on since the day of dawn, especially in Australia, when that happens, well, what we need to do, from what I understand, is, well, Indigenous Australians need to talk, which they have been doing for a long time. But the most important thing is non-Indigenous Australians need to shut up and listen, right?
Thank you.
So let's keep going with your story. So you came and you really started experiencing that racism when you were in primary school in Toowoomba, is that right?
Yes, 100%. I think because I was, misplaced as an Australian Indigenous person, and I'm not Australian Indigenous. I haven't felt what their ancestors have felt. I haven't gone through their experiences, but I have been mistaken for one and treated like how white Australians treat them, and I've seen it, and it's horrible. It's unbelievable. He's hearing statements of people like, oh, they're just on Centrelink benefits, and it's just like, do you even know the history of this country? People are angry because their lands have been stolen, their children have been taken, their family members have been raped and murdered. To this day, like I said, to this day, kids are still being taken away. People are angry for that reason.
Wait,
I'm angry.
Kids are still being taken away today. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. See, because that's something where, and I've been doing my research to continue my research and knowledge on this, and the written literature seems to be that the last known taken generation was in the 70s or the 60s, I think, but then mixed race in the 70s. But what you're saying is that's still going on today.
Yeah, well, what about, you got fax workers coming in and taking children away, and placing them in white homes. You're coming into, a family that has intergenerational trauma from the injustices that have been put on them from the very beginning, and then you are condemned for having any sort of trauma, and not only that, but you're pushing a culture that's not on a different culture and demanding for you to be that way, and to sit there and to blame people and sit there and say, oh, well, people are alcoholics and drug users, and it's just like, but why? Why do people have to turn to that? How much pain have they gone through in your life? That, do you know what I mean? Kids are getting taken away. They are unfairly getting taken away. You could not, if you have a white family that's doing wrong, and you have an Indigenous family that's doing wrong, and they're doing the same level of wrong, I'm going to tell you that black family's kids are going to get taken away, first of all, straight away, without question, and put into a white home. That white family's kids, you're going to go through a whole trial of fighting and being able to have options and going through different stages to be able to get your kids back.
Okay. Yeah, look, I did a little bit of work as a youth worker in residential care for an organization that basically does what you're talking about, where it takes children from FACS and puts them into care, and then a lot of them end up going into foster families and whatnot. And I can say that from my experience, pretty much 80 to 90% of them seem to be of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander descent. And yeah, so it makes perfect sense what you're saying. And this is one great example where, look, I personally, and, I'm admitting that I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about, geez, kids are still getting stolen. It's still happening, right? So, and I want to continue educating both myself and other people. So let's keep going with this and try and dig into some other things, okay? Coming back to your story, so you experienced this discrimination, racism when you were in primary school, and that sounds horrible that you went through that, where you would be ostracized even when you guys were playing. And play in children is so important for confidence and competence and being a part of a community, and you were being told, no, you have to be Pocahontas because of the way you look. I mean, that's horrible. And that's gone on into your high school days as well, right? And then people were trying to fight you, and people were trying to the teachers were also doing it as well. So it's not like, you know, you would assume, or you'd like to assume, that children have a place to be safe around adults, but you didn't, did you?
No, you don't. I mean, I was, especially in high school, like, the funny thing is that the level of punishment you get because by the time, you know, I got to grade 9, I'd been suspended about, I don't know, 6 times or something for fighting. And it's just like, I'm fighting for my life, basically. I'm in class. I can't even get an education because I'm so scared to speak up because somebody's going to say something to me. One time I spoke up, and I'll never forget this. This guy turned around to me and he said, "Shut the fuck up, you CONN or you GOKK or whatever the fuck you are." And the fact that not one person in that room, including the teacher, said anything is disgusting. And you know what's ironic about that situation is I actually looked up that person that said that about me recently, and he's actually now married to an Asian woman and has a half-caste kid. So the hypocrisy is unbelievable. Like, it's just, I don't know. Yeah. I don't even know where I'm going. Sorry, this whole thing makes me shake when I think about, like, you know, going through that as a kid and the impacts that it did. I mean, the impacts that it had on my relationship with my own mother. I was embarrassed to be around my mother in public because I didn't want people to see me with her, because that was going to put more of a target on me. I had to deny my own culture and ask her to please, I begged her, please don't make me the lunches you're making me. It's singling me out. My own brother, to this day, it's been 16 years of us still not having a relationship, was so ashamed to walk near me at school. He would run away when we would get around the corner to walk to school together because he was so embarrassed because I looked more racially different than him, I guess. I'm not sure. There were times where I had people throw racial discriminations at me and he sat back and said nothing. That impacts you and makes you angry as a you know, when you get older, and it's difficult to navigate through in life.
No, I mean, like, just from the study of psychology and human development, it's so important what happens in those earlier years. And for you to go through that, and many people to be going through that, well, that's going to damage you dramatically for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You know, and I think one really important thing to note here is, well, my mom experienced a lot of this as well, because she actually, kids would do that to her as well. You know, we have Chinese in our background, and she was often, bullied and everything about that. And she talks about that today, about how much that still affects her. And she's in her 60s. But one really important thing to think about, and you mentioned this, is, well, a lot of the naive people in Australia think, oh, well, you know, that was a thing of the past. Well, it's like, no, we'll wake up, because there are people, young adults and kids still today, who are experiencing that. And it's even worse now because obviously people can bully online and continue the racism at home, as opposed to just at school. But yeah, like it's horrible to hear that. So continue on here. So you went to, at which point did you come from Toowoomba down to Sydney?
So I moved from Toowoomba to Brisbane when I was about 17. And then I came to Sydney when I was about 23 or 22, I think.
Okay. And what was that like? What was the change like?
In Sydney?
Yeah.
Well, you know.
Also into adulthood, right, as well, so.
Yeah, so it's, yeah, well, I mean, it's a bit different, but I mean, as bad as this is, it's bad to say, but like Queensland is a lot more racist than New South Wales. But that's not saying that New South Wales is not a racist place. It's
Yeah,
a lot
you're not
bigger,
off the
first
hook.
of all. So yeah, just want to state that. It's a lot bigger place, but I mean, there's different cultures here, and the acceptance towards the Asian side of my background, I could see a lot more, but the discrimination towards the Australian Indigenous community still remains. And I still see that, and I still hear that. Not that there's not racial discrimination towards the Asian community. I mean, look what's gone on with COVID. You know, look at the outcome of how people are treating. I mean, a man died in Chinatown from a heart attack because nobody wanted to do CPR on him because of COVID. I mean,
Wow.
that's the level of racism. So yeah, I'm not saying that New South Wales, no, fuck New South Wales, okay, because you are racist. But the difference was, I guess, seeing some of the support that is here, and some of the organisations and the protests and the Indigenous community that fights for their rights here. That's the difference. You know, maybe I'm older, I'm an adult, I see that a lot more. As a child, I didn't see that. So I guess that was the difference coming. But I mean, the discrimination is always going to be there. I mean, yeah, it's hard. It's a hard question to answer, because it's just like the difference is, it's all the same, really. I mean, I haven't been called I've been called names, of course, obviously, but it hasn't been as bad as what, but I keep a lot more out of.
But one thing I'd like to know is, you know, maybe things were a little bit easier in terms of, you know, kids are aggressive, you know, because they don't have any filters. But at least some adults, and I say some, you know, are good enough to not say things directly to you or pick fights with you. Maybe some are, but most aren't, right? But like you said about the situation that happened in your school where you were called names and no one did anything. Well, you know, things like that happen, right? Where people don't say stuff. Someone didn't save this man from a heart attack because he was Asian and they were being discriminative, and now he's dead, right? So that stuff's going on. All this stuff has tainted you and what's gone on in your mind. And so now I can imagine that your whole experience as an adult would be different, because you would be thinking, okay, well, that person might be looking at me because of this or that, or maybe that person didn't sit next to me on the bus because of this or that, or maybe I don't want to go to that bar or club because people of my, you know, image or culture don't go there, or whatever, right? Now, I had a personal experience in Honduras when I was living there in Central America, where I experienced a very, very small taste. And I say that with, you know, with a grain of salt, small taste of what you're talking about, because, you know, when I was traveling around, I was one of the only white people, right, in their country, and they're all looking at me. They would try and charge me different amounts for things because they knew I didn't speak the language very well. And so they're trying to do that, and they wouldn't want to sit next to me on the bus and all that stuff. And I mean, that's a very small thing, but that just makes me think of, oh, geez, how much worse it must have been for the Indigenous Australians and just people of all different cultures, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. It is so much worse. But I think even if you are a white person and you are over in another country and you are getting looked at differently, you're still, if you are a white person, you're still white. You're still the minority. So that feeling of feeling like, oh, I'm being looked at differently is, it's just I don't know. It's hard to compare because you're still the minority. So I don't know. Yeah. That I always have that problems with that sort of situation. But I understand what you're saying. I do, and I can understand it's similar. It's like it's the same. I guess I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I do, because it's the same sort of experience.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, for me, I think my travels have been great for me to just have more of an open mind where I can do things like this and have these conversations and educate myself and be culturally sensitive and be empathetic and all those things, because if we're thinking of how to move forward and what's the antidote, if any, well, I think it is a little bit of this, right? This is where it starts, because if a lot of us don't know, and we're too naive to even try and know, well, I don't see a very hopeful future for us. So
Yeah.
I guess with my experience there, I'm just trying to say that, well, I'm fortunate that I had that, so that now, I mean, that was 5 years ago. Now I and through my studies, they did a really good job of, making us sensitive about everything, because working as a counselor, as you know, is, I mean, the diversity that you and I had with our clients when we did our placement was just through the roof. I mean, I didn't even expect the different types, which was interesting. So anyway, let's move on to current affairs, right? So this whole thing that's happened in Minneapolis, there's a huge uproar in America with the brutality and racism from police officers. Now, I'm interested to get your thoughts on what's going on in Australia, or what has been going on, and what your personal experience has been with police officers here.
Oh God, the cops. Well, let's just start with the fact that there's 432 deaths, Indigenous deaths in custody since 1991 that have not even been accounted for. Let's start with that. We're having an uproar in America for George Floyd about I can't breathe, when David Dungay had the same situation. He's in his cell over eating a packet of biscuits. Might I add, this is a 26-year-old man that has schizophrenia, okay? He's in the cell, he's eating biscuits. It took 5 cops to hold him down. Basically, and we there's just so many different accounts of Indigenous deaths that people don't know about. Tanya Day, she was arrested for being drunk in public. She fell and hit her head. Not one, it's on camera. Not one person came to help and see her injuries. She died from those injuries. We've got the guy Kumanji Walker in how do you say it? Yamundu, who he was shot dead in his house, and where is the footage? Where is the body cam stuff? Like, there's that many things. I'm trying to go through the names of and the people and the injustices. Joyce Clark, Joyce Clark died in custody. What's her name? There's so many of them. I'm just trying to go off my head, but there's so many injustices that have happened, and I've seen this. I in Toowoomba, I've seen this as well. Growing up, having Indigenous friends, and literally walking into a shop and walking out of the shop. Oh, you're going to get searched. Like, you're going to get searched right away, and you're going to get talked to like a piece of crap, and you're not going to have any rights. And if you do dare say something, you are going to be arrested. All this stuff is going on, and there's a 15-year-old Indigenous kid in I don't know, Sydney, getting brutally arrested for nothing. What's he doing? Oh, the cop. And what does the media do? The media comes out and says the cop had a bad day. Okay, so you had a bad day, therefore you get to slam a kid onto the ground who's got intergenerational trauma and discrimination, chip his teeth, damage his shoulder, and also mentally traumatize him as well, and keep going what's going on with the injustices between the cops and the Indigenous community. I sit there and I agree with the statement of all cops are bastards, because if you are in a job where you are here to protect and serve, you signed up to protect and serve your community, that means the whole community, including the Indigenous community. You don't sit back and you don't sit there and be silent about murders. You speak up and you put your badge down. You be willing to lose your job because you joined it to protect and serve. You are here to say, hey, I don't agree with this, because the reason that I'm even coming into this is because I want to help people, not racially discriminate and murder people, and then sit there and say things like that he had a bad day. Oh, it's a hard job. It's a hard job. Okay, but where are all the white deaths and all the white deaths that do happen under police brutality get justice? Yeah. Not one over 432, and that's from 1991.
Yeah.
We couldn't even go back to how many deaths prior to that.
Well, I guess,
Um,
yeah, I mean, and that's, I mean, that's a really good indication of some big thing that's going on right now with the fact that, well, this has been happening for like since the day of dawn. As you say, there's 432 recorded deaths. That's when they started probably recording. But what happened before then? Imagine the first, Europeans coming to Australia, and all the pillages that happened during that time, right? And even now, I saw something Will Smith said racism hasn't changed at all. We're just filming it now, and so people are seeing more of it, but it's
yeah,
always been there. In fact, it's always been this bad. Now we're just starting to realize it, which I think is a small silver lining in all this, where, well, okay, we are seeing it now. So what are we going to do about it? There's a huge responsibility for the whole world right now. And I'm more looking at Australia because that's my country where I live, and I think it's important to look locally rather than too globally. But yeah, like it sounds horrible. I mean, all these cases that you were mentioning of things that have happened with other Indigenous Australians in Australia that I've never heard of. I mean, why haven't I heard about these people? Like, because the media play a huge part in this, right?
oh yeah.
So, geez, I don't even know what the right question is here, but what do you think is a way forward? So if you're mentioning that, okay, well, all cops are bastards, right? And they if you don't do anything, and if you sit back and don't do anything when you witness it, well, you're contributing to it. And there's so much depth to it, right? But
Yeah.
what do you think we can do, right? Something, geez, something needs to happen. Something needs to be done. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's such a huge topic. I mean, where to start? Where can you start? The start is with the government. You need to deconstruct the systems first of all that have been made, because they're a fucking mess.
Yeah.
Um, you need to start it. You need to do a treaty first of all. With the Indigenous people, you need to acknowledge the history. You need to acknowledge and educate. Start educating. We're not educating young Australians about this. If we did, maybe you would know about those deaths.
Mm.
Maybe you would have statistics about that, and you wouldn't have to go and do this podcast to ask questions to someone else that had to also do her research to find out this information.
Yeah.
You know, it can't change overnight, obviously, but if you're going to school and you're not even being educated of the correct history of what's going on with Australia, then that's a huge problem. If you're not letting Indigenous people in Parliament to make changes, then it's not going to change. You cannot have a bunch of white people in Parliament making changes for Indigenous people. White people cannot be speaking for Indigenous people. I am an Indigenous woman from Borneo. I am not speaking for Australian Indigenous, but I am saying that the standard needs to be, you need to put an Australian Indigenous person in Parliament, in the government. You need to change the system. The education needs to change. Kids are impressionable. You need to teach kids about discrimination, about racism, about acceptance, and what is right and wrong from the very beginning. Not when you get to 20 something and you're thinking, wow, I've seen something on the media, what's going on?
Mm.
That's the start of it. There's so much change that needs to be done. We need to look at the land and what's going on here, and then give back to the Indigenous community what's rightfully theirs. We are in somebody else's country, destroying it, putting laws down, killing their people still, and it's like, how can we make a change? Stop it. Stop doing that. Change it. Put people who need to make changes within the Indigenous community in the right place of power.
Yeah.
There needs to be, there's not even conversations had with them. That's the point. They're not being acknowledged. They're not being validated. They're not being heard. History is being swept under the rug, and it's making it worse. It's upsetting. It's painful. It's hurting. It's just, you yourself, as a counsellor, having trauma, having to work through trauma, how long that takes. you as a counsellor should also know about intergenerational trauma and what that does to the Indigenous communities and their mental health. Look at the suicide statistics alone. Look at the statistics of all the Indigenous people who are in jail compared to non-Indigenous people. You know, look at how earlier Indigenous people are dying before non-Indigenous people. These statistics are what needs to change. Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to sort of sit there and say, you know, I'm not a politician. I'm not that smart. Like, I'm just going off the basic stuff that needs to start happening. And for me to come to those conclusions, surely somebody who is in political power can put their white privilege down and say, geez, I need to listen to an Australian Indigenous person because this is their land and we are making these issues and we need to bridge the gap properly. When you say sorry, you put action behind it. You don't just say sorry and don't do nothing. You change it. Deconstruct the fucking systems. Basically.
Yeah, and like, oh geez, there's so much there I want to unpack, and I want to make sure I get what the most important thing is in our short time frame today. But from what I understand, what you're saying, right, is we have this hierarchy thing, right? And in the political system, there's a hierarchy. And then in the social system, there's also a hierarchy. And at this point, and I think you mentioned that, well, I'm not a politician and I'm not that smart, which I disagree with. I think you're pretty smart. I know you pretty well. You're smarter than some other people I know. So that's got to be something, right? But in terms of this hierarchy, right, if you're down the bottom here somewhere and you feel like, you know, your voice may not be heard and that, well, yeah, I can understand why you would have reason. I feel like even my voice doesn't get heard. There have been many years where I just haven't voted because I couldn't be bothered. And that's horrible. I mean, it's in my early 20s where I'm young and naive, right? But it's so important to, and I saw a lot of videos about people talking about the racism in America and saying, well, looting and being aggressive and fighting is not the answer. Voting is the answer. Trying to change the political system, like, you know, or at least that's a step in the right direction without taking any more lives, right?
Yeah.
Or creating any more trauma, because I agree with you. I mean, backpedaling trauma is so much worse than preventing it, obviously. I mean, anyone with half a brain knows that. And so, okay, so let's look at this political system. And it's interesting to me because, well, I watched Kevin Rudd's speech last night, from 2008, where they said sorry and all this stuff. And it was all very moving. And there was a few elders in there, a few from the stolen generation, but there was still 90% white people all sitting in the parliament. So you've kind of said that, well, we need more elders, more Indigenous people in parliament to be able to, you know, have more of that control and decision making and all that with what goes on. Because if we can change what's going up at the top, all the fizzle effects will change going down, right?
Yeah.
So okay, so then so there's no real oh, we lost you there. Oh, there you go, you're back. So okay, so there's nothing like what you're saying is it's really difficult to say, okay, well, now you need to go do X, Y, and Z, and we can solve the problem. Well, no, it's much more complicated than that. But I love the fact that we're having this conversation today to do what we can do, right? Because I was thinking about, okay, well, how can I help? How can I do my part? And I started scraping my mind of my resources and my skill set. And I was like, well, I have a channel where I can help people voice their opinion and voice their position. And so, you know, I'm not only having this conversation with you today, but I'm setting up to continue having more episodes with other Indigenous Australians, to be able to keep doing that. Because why not? I think that you should, right? I guess like, I'm just interested to know a little bit more about, well, what happens for you now with all this that's gone on and how it's, I guess, sparked something again that's always been there for you ever since, you know, you were born essentially, and ever since you came to Australia. Well, what happens now for you?
Well, I mean, it's not that it's just sparked it up again. It's always there for me. It's always been there for me. I'm always going to protests. I'm always yelling and screaming continuously about the discrimination in Australia. So it's just more highlighted now. It's just more in my face. That other people are noticing that. And I guess moving forward for me is I'm trying to sort of be more self-aware about my reactions towards the change. You know, I'm seeing people come out and start caring about Indigenous community and racism, and I'm trying to not let my own biases sit there and be like, well, you know, I've heard you say some racist and ignorant things before, but you know, it's all in the media now, and everybody's jumping on this bandwagon that they, you know, they support the Indigenous community and all this stuff, which is great. But what I would like to see moving forward is that continues. Like you said, you are going to continue to do podcasts. You are going to continue sharing and educating and learning. You know, I think moving forward, I will always still continuously promote Indigenous rights. I will always donate. I don't just donate, you know, once every now and then. You know, you need to donate every month. You need to put a portion of your money aside to help those communities that are, you know, being mistreated, and you need to educate yourself more, and you need to also not, as a white person, not expect Indigenous people to educate you about their injustices. You need to educate yourself. You need to educate your children. You need to research, and you need to learn, because this shit is traumatizing and it's hard to talk about. And some people don't want to talk about it, and some people can't communicate clearly about this topic. I find it very difficult to talk about any sort of racism or discrimination without getting triggered. Like I'm pouring sweat right now just because of this topic. That's how much it does. It affects me and impacts me. And not only that, but I'm a community. I'm part of the LGBTQIA community. So, you know, any sort of discrimination infuriates and upsets me. Moving forward, I guess, yeah, I don't even know what your question is, because I'm so, like, I'm all over the place with this. But
yeah,
I guess the change that I need and is to continue talking about it, continue speaking about it, continue sharing, continue going to protests, continue pulling up your family members and your friends. You know, get involved, learn about the history, and speak up, and be angry, stay outraged about what's going on. Everybody is so angry about what's going on. Stay angry and stay this passionate about it. Put as much effort as you are currently doing. That, you know, this protest that's going to be on Saturday will be huge. And I'm so happy to hear that a lot. And I know that majority of those people are also going to be white, and that makes me feel good. You know, seeing that's the change that we need moving forward, and that's what helps me get through this. You know, I see all this stuff and it really hurts. It's triggering. I'm getting angry. I'm exhausted. I'm sad. But then I see these little things and the changes and different people saying stuff, and that's what gets you through it. So for me, yeah, that's the self-care I'm taking, is also not only am I looking at the horrific reality of the world that is every day, but I am seeking out the good that's in the world to try and give me some peace of mind, and know that, you know, there are people out there that are changing and making a difference. You know, for instance, you know, one of the Indigenous foundations have reached their goal now because of with their GoFundMe page. Because of what's going on, people are starting to realize, oh my God, this Aboriginal kid was just shot dead in his bed, and the family members need help to be able to pay for their legal things, to be able to get justice for their son. George Floyd's murderers have now, all 4 of them have now been charged. That was not going to happen if it took 8 days of rioting to get to that level. Yeah. Sorry, I think I'm going off track, but yeah.
No.
Basically, that's my answer to your question. Whatever the question was, I lost track of it.
No, it's okay. So what you're saying is, like, well, what's going to happen now for you is no different to what you've always been doing. You're just going to continue fighting the fight that you know you've been oppressed for so long, and you're going to keep going to you know, protest. You're going to keep calling people out in public or in family.
I do. I do.
Right. And it's not easy to do. And a lot of people are, I'm sure, you know, and I can feel the frustration that you have and the exhaustion for having to do that your whole life. I mean, I can only imagine how difficult that must be. And I suppose for people who haven't experienced that, well, it's time to step outside your comfort zone. And if maybe you don't contribute to, you know, in terms of directly say things, but if you witness it, well, bloody hell, speak up, right? And stand ground for everyone else, so that people who are acting in the tyrannical manner can shut the hell up, basically.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so,
Basically, that's exactly what I'm saying.
yeah,
Summed up
good.
very well.
Well, I'm somewhat of a pretty good counselor, as you should know.
Doing a great job, Brendan.
um, so yeah, like, I guess for other people, then, I mean, the most important thing that I heard there as well is, and I saw this, and I was thinking about this yesterday. So everybody's put this little black thing on their social media for Black Tuesday or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
Cool. I think it's great. Everybody's the topic's there, and people are listening, and people are saying stuff and doing stuff. That's great. But what you're saying is, well, that needs to not just be the hot topic of the week. That needs to happen every week and every month and every year for that matter. And we need to move forward with, don't just make a one-off donation. Find an organization or find something that's a weekly or monthly thing, obviously, that you can afford, that contributes to the ongoing support of everything.
Sorry, my battery was low. I had to move.
That's okay. Yeah, so it's about really establishing a way of life that moves forward and is in the greater good of eliminating racism, teaching our children, who then will be better to teach their children. And then hopefully in a couple of decades or a couple of 100 years, maybe we won't be having these horrific things happen.
Basically, yes, you've summed it up real. That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying continue, and like I said, as parents, as people who are parents, educating your children from the very beginning, so you don't. I am a perfect example of that. I've grown up in a mixed race family. So growing up in that, I've got multiculturalism. I am accepting. In no way ever will you ever see me being racist towards anybody. And that's the level of standard it should be, because I have multicultural parents, that I was taught that. My dad taught me from a very young age that people who are racist to you and people that are going to discriminate you, they don't have the experience that you have. They don't have your background. They don't have your knowledge. They're scared of differences. And until they educate themselves, the fear then goes away. So if you then go and you raise your kids and you teach them that having cultural differences is okay and you should accept that and normalize it, things might start to change. That's one of a billion things that need to change.
Wow. Thank you for really being just, I guess, so transparent with your experiences to help, share your story and run with your flag to really fight the fight that you've been fighting your whole life. And I can't even imagine what it's been like, but I do appreciate that you're able to share that. And I personally and I hope that others can do what we've talked about today, which is not only establish a new way of thinking and a new way of living, but something that's not just the hot topic of the week, as I said before, and something that can be an ongoing contribution, right? And that requires a bit of effort, and people are lazy and people are ignorant sometimes, and people have their own things to worry about. And I get that. And that's it's important to make sure your own house is in order sometimes before you step outside into the real world. But at the same time, sometimes what comes first, the chicken or the egg? If you start taking more responsibility and stepping outside into the real world and seeing what's going on, well, then maybe your little problems in your own world may not be so big at all, right? Because most people's problems that they think about compare nothing to what you've experienced. And so I just want people to really open up their minds, open up their hearts, and start making some change. So let's look at a few, as we're wrapping up now. I want you to sort of have an opportunity to share what resources, or, you mentioned there's a protest going on tomorrow in the city. What else is going on? What can people do?
Well, yeah, first of all, the protest is in tomorrow, Saturday. They keep moving the location just because the size is getting bigger and bigger already. It started off, they're going to do it at Hyde Park and then Chippendale. Now it's at Town Hall. So, it's going to be a big one. And people go. I mean, there's people posting on Instagram and Facebook and people posting that I've never seen ever give a shit before, that are giving a shit online. So put your money where your mouth is and donate. go to the protests, learn about these things. I have a whole heap of links on my Instagram page. I'll send you all the details of all the GoFundMe pages, all the Australian Aboriginal organisations that you can help donate to make some changes. Also, follow Black artists, follow musicians, go to festivals like Yarbin, learn, change the fucking date. First of all, don't even get me started on Australia Day, but learn about these things that you need to learn about. I mean, it's so easy for people to be lazy and to sit there and be like, oh, I have got my own things going on, but you don't actually. But it's easy for them to say that because it's like, well, you don't have years of genocide and murder behind you, and also just to acknowledge that, I know, because you are sitting here saying, I've got a very different experience, but I would just like to highlight that my experience as a an EBAN person is completely different from an Australian Aboriginal perspective, and I'm not experiencing and going through what they've gone through, but I do experience the racism, and I have been there for it, and I have been racially profiled as that, and felt a minor of the injustice. I just want to say that before, just because I don't want to upset any Australian Indigenous people. So yeah, I just want to say that.
Yeah, I think it's, I appreciate you saying that. And I'm sure that no one's going to be upset by you sharing your story. And, the whole point of this is that it's not to compare, I suppose, but to also just get to a point of equality. As well, I guess that is comparison. Let me try and phrase this right. I think that people who have directly experienced, in terms of Indigenous Australia, will be proud of you for sharing your story, because it's so hard to say, well, this person's 100% Aboriginal, or this person's 100% Asian, or, everyone has this mix, right? There's so much going on because time has passed, and not much time has passed, but some time.
What I will say is that if it weren't for the Australian Indigenous community, I would not be alive to this day. Being separated by all the white community, they were the only people to take me in. I grew up around, a heap of different Indigenous communities. I grew up with Murrays, they're great. I come down to Sydney, I've met a whole heap of different Kooris, they're awesome people. They take you in, they accept you, they've never been racist to me in any way whatsoever. So without the Australian Indigenous community, I would not be here today, and that's why I do try to educate, and I do fight for those rights. But I always need to highlight that, I don't want to ever take away from that, their experiences and my experiences. But yes, we are all, of different races, and we all do go through different experiences, and the whole point of this is trying to accept and change that level of discrimination that we all feel.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Kelly, for sharing, and it's good to see you. And
I know. Great. Thank you so much for asking me to do this. I think it's amazing that you are a mixed race person, so let's get all those other, let's get the full cast white people doing podcasts about what they should be doing. I think it's awesome that you're trying to bring awareness and stuff, and you've always been so accepting, and I love your work. I think you're a great person, so what you're doing is really good. So thank you so much for asking me to share my experiences. And I might add that I gave a PG rating of my racial discrimination in this. So people want to sit there and say, oh, it's not that bad, trust me, it got bad, but I'm not going there.
Yeah, so Kelly and I had a little discussion before to make sure that she would rein it in a little bit, so I don't have to put it on the R-rated version of the podcast. But no, I mean, I can only imagine that we've scraped the surface, or seen one, the tip of the iceberg with how deep these wounds may go for you. So I encourage, I commend you for your courage to speak and to put yourself on the pedestal to share. And I hope people listening will have the courage to step outside their comfort zone and start just, doing what we've talked about, and making some changes that are ongoing, not just one Band-Aid fits all sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm planning on going down to this protest tomorrow. I'm really like, it's such a weird thing with COVID, and you know, I had it, and now there's big people coming together. So I don't know what to think of that, but
You're just like, what do I do? Well, what I will say is, if you do see a lot of stuff is going around about what's going to happen there. I do advise wearing goggles. I do advise wearing masks. I do advise wearing, protective gear. Turn off your location services. Erase your data from your phone. This is some of the stuff that you're going to have to think about. And it's funny because people are like, oh, wow, we really have to think about that. And I'm like, well, if you're, try being black, yeah, you got to think about it. Right now it's come out saying, the community has come out saying that there will be, I can't say the word swastikas. Is that how you say it? The Nazi symbol.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. They've stuck that on the wall and with the intention of people ripping them off, and there are razors behind them. So if you do, I'm just saying that if you do go to the protest and you do see them, don't tear them off because it's been planted there for stupid reasons. There's a little glimpse of the stupidity and racism that we have. We have a protest going on because we want to sit here and protest black deaths in custody, and there are people who are openly planting things around that are against that. I just can't believe it. It's just astounding. So stay safe. Be close but not too close to other people. Try to stay away from the police. Get the point across. Don't loot, don't riot, do it peacefully. But yeah, stand your ground and fight the good fight. I'm so glad. I'm proud of you for going. It's such a great atmosphere to be around.
Yeah. Well, in my opinion,
always will be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in my opinion, when you compare two like crisis, one is COVID, and one is, what's been going on since the day of dawn. I mean, like, what's worth fighting for, or dying for, or getting the virus for? I mean,
this is it.
It's not even a question in my mind. So it's time to do it. So
yeah.
Hopefully, I'll see you there tomorrow.
Yeah. You'll hear. We'll hear.
Yes, I'll hear. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, Kelly.
Thank you, Brendan.
I'll see you soon, and all the best.
Thank you so much. See ya.
Bye. Well, thanks guys for listening all the way to the end of the episode. As you can see, Kelly's story is so unique and so traumatizing, not only to hear, but obviously to even imagine what it might have been like for her. And so I encourage you to, this is just one story of hundreds of thousands, right? So it's so important that we start opening up our mind, opening up our heart, and start looking to how we can make change. Kelly and I discussed how you can make some change, and in the show notes down the bottom, I'm going to put in there links of places you can donate to other services, or potentially if you need more information, there is some website links there with credible information. So start watching some documentaries, start doing some research, start having conversations with people, and let's get this thing going, guys. So again, thank you for listening. If you really want to get on board, please share this video. Please listen to the next episode I do and the one after that, and let's keep that ball rolling so that it doesn't become just a one-off thing. Thanks, guys, and have a great day.